What's up, everybody? So we're out in the shop, and in this video what we're going to do is we're going to attach these handle scales to this knife. Then we're going to go ahead and shape the handle. Then we're going to put an edge on this knife, and we're going to do a little bit of sharpness test. So that's all going to happen in this video, so sit back, relax, and enjoy it.
So we're going to start by drilling our holes for our pins. We're using a 3/16 drill bit because we are going to be installing 3/16 pins in this knife. It's going to be 2 micarta pins and 1 lanyard hole. Once we get that done, we're going to go ahead and mark the outline of the handle tang on the scales so that we know where to end up cutting all the excess off. And then we're going to go ahead and draw the radius for the front of the scales that are going to meet up with the ricasso area on the knife. Now for this one, because we have a high polish finish on it, I'm going to go ahead and tape up the blade so we don't risk scratching it up for the rest of the process. Now on this one, I'm going to go ahead and cut pretty much all of the excess off. I'm going to cut the line completely off. I know that I'm going to end up shaping these to the handle tang itself, so I'm just going to remove all of the excess material and make it easier on me later in the handle shaping process. Now you want to be careful whenever you're doing this because you don't want to cut too much and end up having to change the shape of your handle because you cut too much scale off, or just waste the material in general. So make sure you have a plan before you do what I just did. Now on this part, we're going to go ahead and start shaping the front of the handle. This is the area that's going to be matching up with the ricasso area. You can't mess with this after you get the handle attached, so you got to do all of the shaping and sanding and finish work on the front of this before you attach the handle scales to your tang. And the reason why you can't mess with this after they're attached is because you'll end up messing up the finish of your knife, especially on a knife with a high polish like what we have going on right now. What I'm doing here is I'm just going to go through and start with 220 grit sandpaper. I'm going to do 220, 320, and 500 grit. And I'm just going to leave it with a 500 grit finish. That's all that's really necessary with G10 like this. It buffs out very easily. So that's what we're going to do. Now it's time to go ahead and attach our handle scales. So what we're going to do here is just mix our 5-minute epoxy. This is an epoxy by JB Weld. I have pretty good success with this, so I'm going to keep using it until I end up going with something else, like a different brand or something. But what we're going to do is we're just going to put a light coat on everything. So go ahead and coat your scales, and then put your pins in place, and then do a light coat on the tang itself. It's a lot easier to do all of these steps like this rather than trying to put epoxy in between your pins and do all of that stuff. Just put epoxy on everything and then go ahead and put it all together, and it makes it a lot easier. And when it comes time to putting your clamps on, you're going to make sure that you just put enough pressure on to get a little bit of a squeeze out and to make sure the scales are on there where they need to be. But don't go too heavy with the squeezing because you'll just squeeze all the epoxy out. And what I'm doing right here is I'm spreading out the epoxy all the way around it to make sure that the little gaps from the rasp and the file lines are full with epoxy, so when we go to sand everything down, there's not weird gaps where those file areas are. And then we clean off the excess around the ricasso with acetone on a paper towel. Now once we got everything just squared to the handle tang itself, we're going to start and contour the handle. Now I want to do a very subtle Coke bottle shape with this because these aren't very thick handle scales, so I don't want to do something super deep and really contoured. I want it to be very subtle. So I'm just going to be doing a slight angle from the middle of the handle where that palm swell is forward. So I'm just going to do a slight angle towards the front. And I'm going to make sure and check over and over and over with this to make sure that I'm putting everything where it needs to be. So the tapering towards the front, the rounding on the back of it that we're doing right now, making sure that everything is positioned where it needs to be positioned. So what I'm going to be doing is the entire time I'm contouring these handle scales, I'm going to be putting it in my hand. I'm going to be feeling to see if there's any hot spots where it feels uncomfortable, and then I'm going to start modifying those things. But right now we're just focusing on getting that initial shape and contour so that we can then start smoothing everything and rounding everything. But you can see that we're getting that nice subtle Coke bottle shape. Now we're going to replicate what we just did on the opposite side. And I could have been doing this with my 8-inch contact wheel, but I didn't want to change everything around, so I just made it work with what I have right here with my flat platen and my top wheel on it. And it turned out just fine. So again, put it in my hand, make sure everything's where it needs to be, and that everything is starting to kind of work out and adjust when I need to adjust. And then we're going to start contouring and rounding off the hard edges. And I've got an idea that I want to do with this. I want to round everything over, but I want to leave a little bit more of a hard line on the face of it so that it has a really flat side and then nice curved edges. I think it'll leave a real good result in the end, and this is something that I've wanted to try a little bit, and the end result looks really good. But right now we're just working on, like I said, breaking that hard edge and getting that shape where we want it, and we can start seeing that green outline going around the scales. And this will end up going all the way around, and it's going to leave a cool effect. So we're just going to continue to do more contouring and adjustments and fine-tuning. The goal is to get a lot of the material removed on the 2x72 so that all we have to do on the oscillating spindle sander is just refining and rounding. So once I got that where I wanted it, now it's time to go to the oscillating spindle sander. You can also use a small wheel attachment on a 2x72 or a drum sander on your drill press if you have one of those. Pretty much all these do the same things. I really like the oscillating spindle sander. I've had it for a while and it gives me good results. I eventually will go to a small wheel attachment because it'll free up space on my workbench, because all I'll need is the little thing that holds the small wheels versus this big oscillating spindle sander. But what we're doing right now is we're just rounding over the edges and softening them up, making the handle more comfortable in the hand. And this is a great step to just smooth everything out and make those lines flow real well together before you start hand sanding. The more work that you do on the 2x72, and the Oscillating spindle sander, the less amount of work that you got to do when it comes to hand sanding. Now I will tell you, you've got to be careful using these tools because they remove material very fast and you cannot put material back on once you remove it. So just be patient and take your time while you're doing this. And like I said, put the handle in your hand as many times as possible to make sure you're putting the contours in the right area so that you do not have an uncomfortable handle. Because a beautiful knife with an uncomfortable handle will not be used. It'll just sit there on a shelf. Now if you see right here, I'm going at different angles across the spine with the sandpaper. That was to get out some of the more intense grinding lines from the heavier grip belts. So I typically don't go across like that, but I needed to get those lines out. The easiest way to do that is to sand across them and then start sanding even parallel with the blade. The reason why it's easier to go across and do that is because if you're sanding with those grind lines, you're pretty much just going to keep sanding the grind lines further in. Now, what we're going to do with the handle is we are going to sand it with 220, 320, 500 grit, and then I am going to end up hitting it with a 1000 grit at the very end, but that's just to make sure everything looks really good in the end result. Now, I am making sure to sand everything with this because I plan on buffing the spine of this knife all the way around and leaving it with a high polish. But what I needed to focus on with the hand sanding was to keep the sharp line that goes all the way around the handle. So I'm focusing on that and making sure that I don't round over the things that I don't want to round over. So got to pay attention to that while you're doing fine work like this. Now with the buffer, I'm using a green compound and a medium wheel, and I'm at my highest speed that my drill press goes, and it leaves a very good result. As I'm buffing this, it just started making all the colors pop, and it made me fall in love with this handle. Now when it comes to sharpening it, I'm going to be using the 400 grit, the 600 grit, and the 800 grit belts on my 2x72, and then the leather stropping belt on my 1x30. Now, I'm not going to speed this section up just yet because I want you to see how slow I'm coming across this belt. So this is just real time, and I'm taking my time on this because right now I am grinding in the secondary bevel, and because this knife had already a really fine edge, I could have easily messed up the blade by not taking my time and paying attention to what I'm doing. So this is me just easily going into it and getting that secondary bevel where I want it and even and smooth. And then we're going to go ahead and speed it up. Now, the first belt, which is this 400 grit, does take the longest out of all of them because you're setting everything up and getting that edge nice and refined. And then we're going to take the next two belts, which is the 600 belt, and we're going to just start developing a burr on that edge. And to be honest with you, I was already getting a little bit of a burr from the 400 grit, so I only had to make a very few amount of passes on the 600 and 800 grit just to make sure that I was happy with the edge. So we're getting a nice burr developed on this 600 grit, and then we're going to get a really nice burr developed on the 800 grit, which we're about to use right now. Now, the point behind the burr is we're trying to get the edge so sharp and so fine that the metal actually starts kind of folding over on itself, and you'll start seeing that develop going down the edge as you're sharpening it. You'll start seeing the edge kind of fold over on itself because it's getting so fine. And what I'm doing with my thumb is I'm kind of moving that edge to side to make sure that I have that burr all the way down it, so that I can then go over to the stropping belt. And what we're doing here is we're just doing light passes on this to take that burr off the edge and leave the sharp cutting edge. So we've made it thin enough that it's able to fold over on itself, and then we're removing the part that's folding over on itself with the leather stropping belt. And this is going to leave a razor sharp edge that you can easily shave with, and with this particular knife be able to skin with. So you can see right here next to my watch, I'm just going to go ahead and remove all that hair right there. I really need to stop doing this because I am going to end up bald on one arm. But it definitely is razor sharp.
Yep, that's sharp. Guys, check this out. So we got our Farriers Rasp high polish. We've got our G10 and vulcanized paper liner scales that we made. And you can see what I'm talking about with that punch of color. Look at this. Just look at the contrast with all of that. Just stands out, looks super sleek. This is red or maroon G10. It's an 1/8 of an inch thick. Vulcanized paper liner, and then another layer of red G10. Black micarta pins, and a 3/16 brass lanyard tube right there. Just super nice. Let me give this a little one of these, so you can actually see that. My fingerprints were all over it. We got a mirror polish all the way around. It's not just on the blade. Absolutely awesome. I'm super happy with how this turned out. It's insanely comfortable in the hand. We've got a Coke bottle, just a subtle Coke bottle shape handle. Nice, just nice contouring. And again, I love that punch of color right there. But guys, I want to know if y'all think that this was a good idea to do this handle combination with this knife, because I know that sometimes whenever I make these, at the beginning y'all go, I don't know if that's going to look good. I would prefer this handle. And then I end up making it, and a lot of the times y'all go, okay, now that you put it together, I see it. It looks good. I want to know if this is one of those instances. Guys, I'm excited to hear what y'all think about this beautiful knife. I know that I've been planning on making a leather sheath for a while, and I think that this is going to be the perfect knife to start my leather sheath making game off. So I will be making a leather sheath for this. This is replacing one of my EDCs that I just sold, so I will be using this from now on. Guys, this is the end of this video. If y'all would, give this video a thumbs up, share this video, because that's beautiful. And guys, If you haven't yet, bottom corner, hit that subscribe button so you get notified of all the stuff that we have that's coming up. And just so you know, we got a Go My series coming up. We got Damascus series coming up. We got a lot of stuff coming up. Guys, thank y'all for coming by. Thank y'all for spending your time with me. Y'all have an amazing day. Y'all stay safe out there. I'll catch y'all next time.